Welcome to the Alpha Warrior Show. We're excited to share diverse perspectives and expert insights with you. Please note that the views and information expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Alpha Warrior Show, its management, or our partners. Each of our affiliates and sponsors and partnerships is a separate entity, and their opinions are their own. Today's content is provided for information and educational purposes and should not be taken as specific advice, whether it be financial, medical, or legal. While we strive to present accurate and useful information, we cannot guarantee its completeness or relevance to your specific situation. We provide all information as is and encourage you to consult with a professional advisor to address your specific individual needs. Your use of any information from this broadcast is entirely at your own risk. By listening further, you agree to identify and protect the Alpha Warrior Show and its associates from any claims or damages arising from your use of this broadcast content. Changes to this disclaimer may be made at any time and will be done effectively immediately upon posting or broadcasting. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you find the episode both informative and thought-provoking. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
That gets me so pumped up when I see that now. Best $23 I ever spent. Wish I could take credit for that one, but I did. And on that one, I reached out to the professionals, you guys. And if you want to know where I got it done, let me know. I don't keep secrets. Whatever I can do to help the community that's out there. You guys, this is the Alpha Warrior Show. I'm your host, Alpha, as if you haven't seen enough of those logos to figure out where you're at. That's okay. I'm excited. And one of the reasons I'm really excited is today's show is more lined up to where I see the longevity of this podcast. I know right now, the last few years, we've been conquering COVID and the election fraud and tyranny and all this because I mean, we're fighting for our lives, we're fighting for our country. And I like that. And that's why those are our priority missions. But where I would love to do this, if you guys continue to be listeners, over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, however long God graces me with, is these conversations with people out there that are doing things that help us, individually, help us as couples, help us as families, like the real personal kind of things, the growth things, the things to empower ourselves. Like I love that. these are the kind of conversations that I hope I get to have more of into the future. And like, what are you talking about? Well, you're hitting us with a lot here. You're going to enjoy this show. Trust me, you are. And the guest today, Amy Loftus, she has a lot. All those links are down in the description. Follow her on X, follow her on Telegram. Music. She does music. That's an amazing voice. Maybe I sneak something in on there if I get some permission. But before we do that, let me get to 2 quick sponsors, you guys, because streaming ain't free and I got mouths to feed. So first on deck, my partners at Goldco. Be prepared. It's easy. It's fast. The rich are buying gold. That should be an indicator. AlphaLexGold.com. Links down in the description. The IRS, you guys. I have a couple of different scripts out there that I like to read from time to time and change it up, and they're all equally important, just from different perspectives. But one thing that we do know is we've got skyrocketing inflation, like dangerous inflation. We have nearly $32 trillion in debt, $4.7 trillion in proposed taxes, new taxes, as if we're not taxed enough. Freaking A, they're stealing all of our stuff. And Biden and his henchmen, they just don't stop. And now they're hiring new ones, and they already hired some gun-carrying IRS agents in all 50 states. Like, this is a complete problem everywhere. This is not one of those things where you get to run to a state to avoid this. This is an all 50 state problem. So that's why I partnered with top precious metals company, Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time corporated 5,000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like me and you place over $2 billion worth of gold and silver. And right now they're offering my supporters, that's right, you guys listening, you guys watching, up to $10,000 value in bonus silver while supplies last. So don't pass up the offer. Go to alphalexgold.com right now. Links down in the description. So if you're driving, don't try to write it down. Keep your eyes on the road. And with that, we'll go to our last commercial, and we're commercial free to the end of this. America's favorite mustache, and always going to be one of my partners, Mr. Lindell, and I'll be back in 60 seconds.
When I started MyPillow, it was just a problem solution, one product company. Well, since then, with the help of my dedicated employees, we now have hundreds of products, some you might not even know about. To get the word out, we're having a $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows, $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. And for the first time ever, our 6-pack towel sets, you guessed it, just $25. Our brand new 4-pack dish towels, $25. And I've never done this before. Premium MyPillows with all new Giza fabric, any size, any loft level, even king size for only $25. And there's so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code for our $25 extravaganza. Order $75 and over. Your entire order ships absolutely free.
Mike, what are you doing? $25? You're reducing my commission, Mike. That's okay, guys. That's what I would tell him. Like, Mike, you're giving this stuff away, man. Trying to feed mouths over here. Those are great deals. And why does Mike do that? Because the big box stores, cancel culture, they've come after him. Culture. That might have something to do with the conversation we got coming up. My Pillow, my store, promo code Alpha, links down in the description. Let me bring up the woman you guys are really here to hear from tonight. Amy, how are you doing, ma'am?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I loved that introduction, and I feel I definitely belong here. Very grateful to be here.
You absolutely do belong here. I'm grateful for have you as a guest. And, it's always, I'm one of those people like, give me feedback. Like, I want to hear what my audience has to say. And I remember a long time ago, I was like, this whole thing's new to me. I never went to media school. I didn't get any podcasting instructions. I just saw, my country's dying. I'm being persecuted. There's not enough people. There's people they'll toe the line and they'll get close to almost full disclosure and truth. But then people kind of hold back because there is a lot of money in this industry if you play the game the way they want you to. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. I was like, you know what? If no one's going to say the truth, I'll join the ranks of the ones that do. And so I ended up making that intro. And I remember when I started to meet people, in the community, they're like, hey, you got a long intro. Like, it's a really long intro. And I'm just like, it's like, I think it's like a minute and a half, that first video, or a minute, 20 seconds. They're like, yeah, it should be like 15 seconds, 20 seconds. I'm like, what? I'm like, man, I went overboard. So I started to reach out to some of my followers that have been longtime followers. Like, hey, what do you think? And they said, it's long, but I like it. Like, don't change it. That's you. It's what you saw. It's what you envisioned. Roll with it. And I was like, you know what? Why do I want to adapt to the culture? Let me help change the culture. Let me stop, I'm going to stop playing Tetris. I'm just going to blow the board up. I'll be the
Yeah.
anomaly. And, I happened to come across your profile and look at some of the stuff you're doing on X, formerly Twitter. Don't get confused. And I was like, man, this woman's really putting out some good thoughts. And then I looked in deeper and I was like, man, a book, music, Zoom stuff for people. I was like, wow, this is what I'm talking about. I was like, let me see if she'll come on my show. And here we are. And so, before the show, I said, one of the things that I want to cover is this culture capture. And I was like, oh, this is like awesome. I want people to understand what this is. So I'll turn it over to you. Culture capture.
Culture capture. Thank you so much. And I just want to tell you, this is the first thing I've done in 4 years. I am so nervous. I mean, I really got canceled, and it's very strange to get canceled when you weren't really totally a big success. I was just a working, hustling songwriter. And so I couldn't tell the difference between ordinary rejection and the cancellation. It just was like, it was so overwhelming. And I've been working on content for 4 years, and I'm so grateful to present this. So thank you so much for giving me a chance and for noticing my profile and having me. It means a lot. And culture capture is a term I coined while I was writing a Substack, just to, I started a Substack to understand my own experience in the hopes that I could find some people who are also feeling the way that I did. And I describe it as when wounds of the psyche meet movements in the culture. So for instance, if I had wounds of the psyche before I was married that caused me to feel very fearful of emotional intimacy and dating. And I was sabotaging relationships. I was afraid of relationship. And so that was a wound of my psyche. And the movement in the culture that it hooked up with was, I don't need a man. I don't need a man. Gloria Steinem's favorite line or famous line, some of us are becoming the men we wanted to marry. By the way, Gloria Steinem is enjoying her marriage to David Bale as we speak. So she inspired people to become the person they were looking for. And I actually did become that person. I was I'm a very hard worker. I was just very motivated and interested in expressing myself and sharing my gifts and sharing my voice. And I could not even let a man open a door for me. I remember going out to dinner with a man who was interested in me in Nashville, and I went to get my purse at the end of dinner, and he looked at me and he said, can you just let me pay? I saw his exhaustion with my rigid resistance of him just wanting to make something nice for me. And the truth is that was terrifying for me to receive. And I now encounter women who I'm helping in my membership who are equally as terrified of receptive feminine following. And so it's the emotions and the wounds of the psyche meet a culture that is now amplified to a degree. I've been with my husband for 12 years. So 12 years ago, it was bad. It has amplified to a degree that they will reinforce the wounds in their psyche and in their emotions because the culture is saying that anyone who talks about a feminine follower is oppressing women. And I am not. And empowered women, and I'm not talking about the workplace, I'm talking about in relationship, women who are empowered in their marriage because they're surrendered. It's very, very delicate and it's full of nuance, but it's actually the most powerful place to be, I think. I don't consider growing old alone in an apartment in fear with activism groups as your family substitutes, substitute roles. I don't consider that empowerment. And I have seen how much pain women are in because they come to me and I see their faces. And, I've had women come to me who are suffering the pain of having had an abortion, and they look at me and say, I thought you were pro-life. And I say, I am. And that includes your life. I'm here to hold space for the pain because I know what they're going through. And I know that they are victims of what I call culture capture. And in your intro, when you said this is a cognitive battlefield, it is. And we are responsible. We have to restore innocence in our own bodies, in our own lives, in order to see it in the culture. Because what's happening today is it is actually evil, and it's frightening. And, I can't, to me, it's all one issue. It's a holistic issue, and it's going to then have its avenues and its threads out.
Let me interrupt there, because you 100% nailed something that is, I got goosebumps, because you said, it's this issue, and then there's all these layers to the onion afterwards. And I mean, we could go on for hours on this conversation, but when I look at, where this country is and this world, I mean, if you really want to go that way, and you don't have to rewind the clock that far. If we just go back from the 50s to present day, you can kind of see the culture, being chipped away at. And what I see, because I do believe in God and I do believe in the devil, and at a minimum, good versus evil. And I say, well, the question everybody has, what's the end game? What's it look like? And I'm like, I don't know exactly what the end game is, but I can tell you one of the final stages is, they're looking at whether it's transhumanism, or, they're already dehumanizing us. But long story short, to get there, you got to destroy the way men see themselves as men, the way women see themselves as women, because it's that connection that goes back to, Adam and Eve, the way, God created the partner for man. And if you can destroy the nuclear family, which is what we've seen happen over the last couple of decades, everything falls apart. To me, like, the root of saving humanity is saving and protecting the nuclear family.
Absolutely.
And so when you identify that, to me, I'm 100% there, like bullseye. Like, heck yeah, we need, and there's just so much poison's been thrown out there. I'm listening to describe your personal experience, the stories that have been shared with you, and I'm like, man, we've done some damage to our society.
We have done some damage. And I think there's so much to grab there, but I'm actually going to grab, you believe in God and you believe in the devil. And there's something that I want to make a note of. And that is that, I was as woke as could be until 2018. I was a songwriter and a yoga teacher and a teacher trainer. I was teaching, I was in the Marxist world, and I've loved Jesus all along, and I've prayed to Jesus all along, but I did not know I was practicing what is liberation theology. Look into it. It paints Christ a Marxist. It's not Christianity. And so I was in that whole permissive woke world. I was pretty safe based on my standards, but I was constantly being tempted to bow to that culture. And I got sick with chronic pain, with a complicated issue that took years to resolve itself. And I started to pray for God to release my hatred of Trump, because I knew that it was ruining my life. And I knew hating someone that I don't even know was ridiculous. And I believe that those tiny prayers that started in 2018 changed my life once 2020 came along. And so what was happening was a transformation in me. And I started to understand that in the New Age woke war, so the New Age capture that, my father tried to prevent me from seeing as virtuous, but, and tried and failed. And I've restored that in my life. And I read my Bible that's inscribed from him, but at the time I was drifting into that. And New Age is the gateway to woke language. New Age and also 12-step. And I don't want to smear 12-step because I've had a lot of help from Al-Anon for various different reasons. But there is, these are captured institutions. So just like a knife can cut bread and feed a family, it can also murder someone. And so you have to know who you are, and you have to be really connected to your higher power to be able to identify what is a threat. But at the time, I was really captured by the New Age woke movement. And so I was part of that chorus that went, oh, the devil is just a construct. You know, evil is, we all have a choice, and it's dark creates light, and to create something, something must be destroyed. Not knowing that this is moral relativism, which is a tenet of Satanism, not knowing that this is literally a gateway into the permissive movements that we're now seeing today. And I actually had an experience when I was touring as a musician. I was on a radio tour, and I had a very scary experience in a hotel room. And I said, Jesus Christ, please surround me. And I felt protected. I fell back to sleep. I left the hotel as fast as I could. My dad was the only person I told about at the time. It was 2007. It scared me so badly. I still, though, continued on. I still was unable to, a fish can't see water. And so you can't see what are threats. And they're very, very good at hiding them. And so through recovery, I was able to restore my relationship with God. And then in 2020, it was just a conversion. It was just a complete reorientation to the world. And so, which just changed my life. And it created a lot of conflict. My husband and I went through a lot of pressure. We came out on the other side better than ever. And so many of my relationships are like that. And then others, like so many of us, I lost them. But it's really important to understand that the devil, if no one is looking for the devil, then they're not going to find him. And so nobody's looking for the devil in New Age and woke and Marxist culture. They're just not. It's like, oh, well, let's just contemplate it. Let's contemplate and reinterpret objective truth so that we can get to a point where we're flooding a child with images and content that registers as a trauma in the brain, and we find it just amusing. I mean, and that's the part that I can't remove or subtract anything that's going on from what I teach, because I teach about masculine and feminine energies. And I could talk to a 15-year-old who wants a double mastectomy, and I could help her to restore that she is experiencing her masculine energy. And for Christians who don't like the word energy, I also say masculine and feminine tendencies. And I teach from biological realities. So I know it makes people uncomfortable when I'm talking about energy, and I understand that. But the way to interpret it in terms of embodiment, which God does want us to understand that this is a command center for for the information he's giving us. And so if you think of a man who is predominantly testosterone with some estrogen, and a woman is predominantly estrogen with some testosterone, we have a delicate structure, and we have a little bit of what our complementary partner has. And it's the same with energy. So it can also be interpreted as yin and yang, which I know might be uncomfortable for Christians. But once again, we have to remember that knife. You know, you can cut bread and feed a family, or you can murder. So we have to sort of, I think, get into a perspective of recovery and not flinch about these concepts, but to use them consciously and with an understanding that they will help us to restore biological realities. They will help us to fight on the cognitive battlefield. They will help us to identify what is culture capture and what is not. And so that's what I think God made me to be. I think that the experience I have in yoga and in 12-step recovery and other modes, it's really helped me to have a vocabulary. While I don't do any of those things anymore, and even when I was a yoga teacher, I was more like a physical therapist. I had more of a physiological perspective. I wasn't like chanting, and I couldn't stand a lot of the stuff that goes on in LA in yoga. I was just scared of it. I had really, really good standards, and so mostly out of fear. It just creeped me out. So I have to say, I was sort of on the conservative side. I was doing singer-songwriter gigs at churches and stuff, and like my fellow yoga teachers would be like, "Oh, okay, no, I'm not going to go." You know, I was seeing the hints of what was to come in 2020. But the point is, there was something to be taken from that. There are some awarenesses that I have where I have religious friends who shut down. They're shutting down. I don't talk about that. And I'm like, okay, but if it is a mechanism, you know, if you can include your understanding and your relationship with God and learn that there are mechanisms on earth for us to restore these crucial experiences between men and women. And yes, I've focused on in the book that I'm writing. I've focused on just the last 50 years because it's enough. I mean, if you look into the Frankfurt School and you look into how this capture has just slowly, it just crept in. It just crept in. And it's pretty frightening.
Especially because it did it in a near perfect design. I mean, a near, like, in my former life as a detective, pattern recognition, a lot of the way we solve homicides and all these crazy things is we're looking for pattern recognition, because even though people, the murders and the scenes may be unique, but murderers all share very similar thought processes and habits. And because of that kind of stuff, that there's similarities to the way crime scenes are. It's very interesting. It'd be a whole show just to talk on that stuff.
Oh, I would love to talk to you about that, because I'm a true crime person. My husband walks in and he's like, I don't know how this is relaxing for you, but I love analyzing personalities. I love seeing detectives interrogate. I love watching people and deciding whether or not, I don't let people tell me someone's guilty or innocent. I'm like, let me see it for myself. And it's actually it's a skill set that I use with women, because the single most important thing I want to help women do is to stop defending the culture that is ruining their lives. They get so mad at me, and I can take it. I got mad at Dr. Pat Allen, who taught me and helped me restore masculine and feminine energy awareness. And now they get mad at me. And so I'll say that, like, one of the things that I teach is signaling. Women have totally lost the art of flirting. And a biological reality about men and women is that right before conception, the egg automatically, not only does it choose the strongest sperm, but the egg actually upgrades the sperm that she picks. So before the actual conception even takes place, there's this elevation and upgrade. And that's actually what takes place when women flirt. When two people experience emotional intimacy on a first date, it's like the energy of a conception. It's not something that's forced or managed or fixed. It's a woman allowing, and it's a man, reaching forward and hoping to get in the running and sharing who he is. A good man is going to be like, well, here's the chink in my chain and the rest is pretty good. And here it is, And so what happens for them is they have these reversed experiences. They call me and say, oh, he talked the whole time. He wouldn't shut up. And I'm like, that's a compliment. He's trying to get in the running. He's trying to let you know who he is. And they've forgotten how to flirt. They're afraid to make eye contact. Everyone's on their phones. So yesterday or Friday, I was teaching signaling, which I learned from Dr. Pat Allen. And she's someone I really encourage people to look up, because she's done a ton of research on the work that I'm teaching and writing about. I'm basically teaching my interpretation of a lot of her work and other things I've discovered myself. And I also don't know where she stands on the culture or anything anymore. So I just have to sort of take off running with it, But so she teaches signaling, 5 seconds. And so all the women who are listening, if you're single, I want you to today or tomorrow, if it's night, go buy yourself a nice latte or something. And whoever it is, if you see a man in the cafe, I want you to hold eye contact for 5 seconds. The first 2 seconds are just kind of what people do all day anyway, just smiling. The last 3 seconds are, it's an energetic shift that takes place where he's like, whoa, I'm getting a message here. And it's very, very vulnerable. It takes a great deal of courage, but to smile. So not the like glare, a man doesn't want to be glared at. He'll feel like he's in trouble, but to smile and to just like flirt, just make eye contact with someone in a coffee house. And you start to, this is not about like trying to pursue. This is about signaling someone in a receptive way so that you can let him know that you're available. Your taxi light is on, and then let him lead. The masculine energy speaks first. The feminine energy listens. Oh, I've got something to tell you about this. So another biological reality, feminine energy listening, masculine energy seeing. So I was listening to you on Liberty Den, and I was laughing so hard because it's so refreshing when you guys are just like being a bunch of guys and being funny. And I grew up with brothers, and it's so refreshing to me because everyone is so careful and politically correct now. And it's like when people are just being funny. I was doing housework and listening to that, and I was laughing so hard. And the episode I'm referring to is, I think it was like a week ago Friday. Anyway, you kept saying, everybody was sharing their interpretation of different topics. And you kept saying, what I see is, what I picture is, and you were drawing these conclusions and you were kind of sketching out a vision. And it was funny. But what's really interesting is that is a masculine energy trait. To secure the perimeter, to get eyes on something, to visualize something. And men fall in love with their eyes. They see a woman and they go, oh, she's beautiful. And women in their feminine energy hear his voice and they go, oh, I just really liked his voice. When my husband called me the first time for our first date, I really liked his voice. And so these are just tiny ways that we can restore our experience in an embodiment, so that we can be on a cognitive battlefield, identifying the issues and the problems. There are little tiny things that we can do to restore what God granted us, which has been stolen. And this is what I was telling everyone on Friday on the Zoom when I was teaching them to signal. And they're going, oh, I can't do this. This is like, are you kidding me? And I said, get angry at a culture that has stolen flirtation. It's stolen it. And little girls at this point, where I live, they say, don't call me pretty, I'm smart. They're being taught all this stuff that's flooding them across across this like spectrum that everybody's talking about, blah, blah, blah. It's like the simplicity of what a child can understand. It's being stolen. So it's being stolen from kids. It's being stolen from single women. And it's up to us to restore it.
Well, first, wow. Wow. I feel like we should be paying for this right now. Holy smokes, man. You know your stuff, Amy. And you put so many conversations into perspective for me personally, just by saying men see and women listen. I'm like, holy smokes, just some conversations that I'm like, I completely get it. And I've always wondered too, is because eye contact is a huge thing for me when I'm talking to people. And granted, I understand we're in this new tech world where it's like phone conversation and we multitask. But when it goes beyond the scope of a casual conversation, to me, eye contact is really important to the point where, if I'm talking with someone, I'll pause, because the second you pause, people stop to see like what happened. And I'm like, yeah, I'm over here.
Yes. That is synergistic. Like like the synergy of an engine needing different components. Mm-hmm. Like it's not just your energy there. It's then the synergistic experience. That is awesome. And
with my, I have adult kids now. And my son's a teenager. My only boy is a teenager. He's 16 to be 17. But then I got two little tiny ones. One that's 3 and one that's approaching a year old. And for the 3-year-old, Alexandria and Charlotte, so my little Allie, when we talk, she'll be doing that. I'll get her little chin, I'll move it over, and I'm like, and I make her do the eye contact with dad when we talk. But the other thing is there's not been a day in her little life where she has not had dad look at her in the eyes and be like, "You're beautiful, baby. Like, you're daddy's princess. You're so pretty." Like, all the time. Because I don't remember where I heard this from, or maybe I read it. Maybe it was a freaking movie. I don't know, because I like movies. But I remember hearing that the way a father kind of molds who he is to his daughter is kind of setting the bar for what the baseline expectation is for her man. And I'm sure there's a lot of variables that go into that. It's just something that I heard and it stuck with me. It worked for me.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for me, it's like, you're going to learn from the moment that you're born that a man is supposed to tell you you're beautiful and you're pretty every day of your life. And,
Yes.
and if he loves you. And then the other part of that, and I'm interested in your thoughts to both those things, is I'm so paranoid with what the media and cartoons are showing. Like, there's some popular ones that I'll let her watch and I keep my eye on it. But people are going to probably judge me on this. It's okay. Vulnerable. I'm going to make myself vulnerable here. On our YouTube channel that I have, I went and found a bunch of the 80s cartoons, like the Smurfs and all these cartoons that I remember growing up with, because in those cartoons, I still seen, the girl, chasing for a prince and the guy still chasing for a princess. Like, it's a very definitive masculine, feminine, here. Like, I still let her watch and I'm very careful with Disney, but I also understand that she's still small enough that she doesn't see the things that we see in these things. So I want her to see Snow White and I want her to see Belle, because I want her as a little girl to have this imagination of where she's the princess in the castle and some knight has to save her. Like, I want her to have those kind of little young fantasies of what romance and love looks like in the future. And then when I hear you saying this stuff, it's like, I really got to protect this little girl. And then obviously her little sister will follow in suit.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you have girls. Yes, you're cherishing her feminine soul. It's really deep. It's deeper than the cognitive conclusion of, oh, if she hears this from me, she'll hear it from a future husband. It's actually not just the cognitive and experiences. It is an invisible, like, force of her being secure in the world because her feminine soul was cherished by her father. And with this movement, one of the ways that women have been captured is that well-meaning parents over the past 50 years, and certainly the past 30 years, well-meaning fathers thought that they were being conscious and, wanting to empower and lining up with the feminist movement. And what they did is they turned their daughters into little men, little Amazon warriors. I became one. And my dad unconsciously did that. He really validated my gifts, my artistic gifts, my work life. He wasn't, I know he wanted me to get married and have a family, and he knew that I wanted that, but there were just so many other factors at work that I had to restore, going back and finding all the moments that he cherished my feminine soul. And that's what was really the fuel for me. It didn't matter. You can't sleep with a pointy glass achievement award. You don't, a Grammy isn't going to visit you when you're 90. And that just really hit me. And that's what I want women to understand when they're criticizing the idea of a little girl like your daughter watching the prince love her. I want women who criticize that to realize how much courage it takes to allow yourself to be loved that deeply. And that what that produces, children and grandchildren and entrepreneurial shared experiences, or, pre-industrial revolution type of equity where it was like a homestead and chores were shared. That stuff is steadfast and it is wonderful. I have an aunt who's in her 90s, and my dad was the youngest of a huge family. And she is one of the wives of one of my dad's brothers. And she's 90 now. And she lives in her home and she's doing very well. And she has 8 children taking care of her and visiting her, and grandchildren. And so her life is so full. And that's what I want women to start thinking about. You don't have that if you grow up and grow old alone in an apartment, fighting for what are really dark agendas that fortify unspeakable crime, unspeakable things. And it's so difficult to go into all that stuff to really understand what's happening, the underworld of darkness, and also the darkness that's hiding in plain sight. It's so difficult to go into that. And there's so many people who just are like, oh, whatever, please. But I did go into it, to an extent there's stuff that it just caused me to lean on God more than ever. But it is important to go into that because you have to understand what this is. It explained so many things to me in my Hollywood experiences, in my yoga experiences. Like, I had references that baffled me. And when I started to learn about what is actually going on in terms of unspeakable crime, I was like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Now I get it. And to bring it to the present, there's actually a show on Netflix right now. I think it's called Baby Reindeer. Is it Baby Reindeer? I think it is. It's a story about a guy who wanted to be a famous comedian, and he had a stalker. And it goes into a lot of layers of what's going on. It gets pretty dark. I'm sort of watching it as R&D. But here's the point. In order for this gender agenda to be accepted, it requires trauma. It literally requires things that register as trauma in the psyche, even if they're really minute. And so they've done this in Hollywood because traumatized people who are desperate for gain, for like an end goal, and I was among them, they will do, stupid things. I had an end. Like, I really still trusted my instincts. I remember one time going to an apartment of somebody who was offering me a movie role. I thought it was an office. And I got there and I realized it was an apartment. And I felt that the door was like hot, like almost like it was like on fire. And I just remember feeling that. And I think that God gave me that impression to tell me, like, this is not good. And the guy that opened the door was like scary. And I do remember I went in there, but I didn't want him to close the door. I said, I'm just going to be quick. I was leaving him a picture or whatever I had to give him. And I said, I'm actually just really running out of time. I just have to be quick. And I don't know I think I maybe kept my foot like on the door. And all I knew was, do not let that door close. And he was like amenable to, maybe he wasn't bad, but I think he was. Anyway, he probably just knew like, this isn't going to be a go. But my heart was beating so fast. That's one of many, that I could tell you. But there are a lot of people who, now I had my reasons for that, which I go into in the book, because the first part is a memoir so that people can understand where I'm coming from. And many have had it far worse, but I had enough experiences that there were those kind of, if you think of them as like holes or wounds in the psyche, to where then I was available for that kind of stuff, for like lower frequency stuff. And my dad used to say, don't compromise, don't get desperate. And a lot of what he taught me guarded me, but I was still susceptible to some of it. Thank God none of it was horrible harm, but just little things like that. And then my instincts would kick in. But many people are traumatized to the point where their instincts do not function for them on behalf of their themselves. And so they end up cooperating with these predatorial people and movements and choices. And then it just goes down and down and down. And in order to make it, you have to be in the music business or in entertainment of any kind. You have to be so amenable and malleable. And that's why I never made it. That's why I was like, okay, forget this. I'm just going to build my own tours. And I did a bunch of indie tours for years. I made my own albums. I traded yoga with the producer's wife and, got all these albums out. And I just was like, I'm just going to do it my way, because I was sitting in those meetings, and they were finding out that I was an Irish girl from Chicago who was like ultimately not going to do that, and that. And I just saw it as, well, my gifts will go away. I won't be able to sing because I'll be singing something I don't believe in. And so something guarded me all along. And now that I'm learning so much, I'm like, this is actually a recipe for all different kinds of people in all walks of life to restore what their instincts are there to do, which is to protect them and to keep them in connection with their higher power, with their maker, regardless of their religion. And, it's so simple when you start to look into it. It's like the sociopath wants us to think of things as complicated. The sociopath wants you to think of things as separate, different. Oh, that's that. You wouldn't understand. All of those energies for if I could do one thing, it's just to empower women to be suspicious of that, to be suspicious of the right thing. They're successfully smearing masculine leaders in all forms of media and television. You can't watch a movie anymore and see a receptive feminine follower. You can't. They're just not there. And then women are doing what they're seeing on TV shows. And so it's like, if they are watching stuff that's full of the smearing of masculine leaders, then they're not going to identify them in their neighborhood. It's like when I'm looking at a woman, I'm just seeing all the men in her neighborhood eating dinner alone. And man, and I got to say this, I feel for men. I really feel for men. And I think it's a spiritual part of me, because when I was teaching yoga, I was teaching a lot of really successful men at like 6:30 in the morning, businessmen, really good guys, and learning stuff. I have great brothers. I had a wonderful father. I have so much compassion for men. Men will allow themselves to be emasculated in order to please, in order to give her what they want. I was reading recently about after divorce, there's lots of men will, after divorce, they're dealing with an impossible ex-wife, and the new wife doesn't understand why he's doing this. And, why won't you just tell her this, this, and this? Well, that would be against his masculine incentive to put himself before a woman. Even if she's an uncooperative, impossible ex, he's still going to do the right thing in terms of securing the perimeter, right? And so all of this stuff has been so denigrated, and it makes me so mad. Like, I literally feel for men all the time. And because it's so nuanced, and then the culture has also produced all this hyper masculinity, which is not virtuous either. And some of it is, but some of it is not the answer. And so they offer the sort of opposite, and it's just as toxic as emasculation.
Yep.
And, it's just like,
it's, that old saying, too much of anything's bad for you. And what I'll see sometimes, especially in social media, I'll see it quite often, is they'll start to take this, quote unquote, toxic masculinity to like another level, where true masculinity is like, no, you're disrespectful. Now you're not being a man. Like, no, like you went too far down that path, buddy.
Yep.
And it's just, it's good and evil, 100%. When as you were speaking and I was listening again, so many conversations, including, because I do have a divorce in my past, and so I was just like, man, that really explained that conversation right there. But the other thing too is, my four adult girls, or my 4 adult kids are all girls, right? Like I said, only 1 boy is what I got. So the oldest being 24, 23, 21, and one's about to be 20. And I remember I was having a conversation with the older one when she first got into college. And she has a good boyfriend, real solid young man, high school sweethearts. Even though I threw all the warnings for them because I prepared both of them, But they were talking about this thing in the university, Cal State San Bernardino, for those that are curious, California. And it was this equality thing with men and women. And so she, and boyfriend's present, she's gonna ask dad a question on this, right? And it's about in the business world, and the equal pay and the whole that whole conversation. And she goes, so how do you feel, dad? Right? Being the dad of, at the time, 4 girls and their little brother. And I said, well, here's the thing. Are there some perks to being the man in the business world? There are. I'm not naive. I'm not blind. Of course there is. Now, your question, I think that you're asking me is, do I think that's fair? And do I have a problem with it? And I said, no. And she, this big eyes like, what? Like, I'm a girl, dad, was pretty much what that look translated into. And I said, well, hear me out. Because later on when you, and I'll just call him John Smith for the purposes of this show. Don't want to get my baby girl upset with me. If you guys are at Sizzlers and a gunman comes into the restaurant to rob everybody, not only do I have the expectation of young John Smith here to make sure he is between you and that threat. And ultimately, if it even cost him his life, I have the expectation that he will put his life to preserve yours in the event something bad happens in that scenario. So if I have the expectation of that, and obviously that's a very extreme scenario, but it comes down to, I expect him opening doors. I expect if you guys are having financial hard times, that he ensures you have the meal and he eats the crumbs at night. That if you're down to your last bottle of water, he licks the cap and you get to have the drink. Like, these are my expectations. So with all that being said, if there's going to be a little bit perk in the business world, then yes, sweetheart, I'm okay with it. And she's like, well, dad, I said, listen, that's just where your pops stands. And and that was a conversation between me and my oldest princess.
Yeah. And also, I mean, if she's going to leave for 8 years so she can have her babies, you don't get to leave the workplace for 8 years and expect the same standards as the people who didn't leave. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, take it from someone who I'm a stepmom, a grateful stepmom, and I would have done anything to have my own child, and it wasn't in the cards for me. And I think of it as a get to. So turning a get to of motherhood into this strike against women. I mean, I do believe that it's becoming painfully obvious that this is just an unachievable circumstance. And I'm actually going to write about equity and equality soon, because the Culture Capture series is on my Substack in essays, because my book was getting too long. So I just had to offload it onto the Substack. But I'm going to go into equity and equality, because equity is achievable in the home. It is not achievable in the public space. And equality is, and there are going to be costs, and it's all about what is the cost, what is the benefit. But if you're going into inviting equality into the home space, now you're getting into a chemistry killer with your husband, because now you're getting into competitive garbage where you're not in complementary energy. And so if you keep equity, which is uneven and it's surrendered, you don't quite know how it's going to happen, there's unexpected wins, and equity belongs in a home sector. And equality belongs in the public one. And so, I mean, did the Frankfurt School just love that women were inviting a chemistry killer into their homes through equality and seeking equality with their husband? Yes, it creates divorce. It creates all kinds of things that ultimately leave women growing old alone. The women that Tucker Carlson is always talking about, he's afraid of, which he should be. So it's like, this is actually, it just requires conscious, critical thought. But where do they want that? They don't want, they want critical theory. They don't want critical thought, because critical theory is a big blob of people, but critical thought is individual awareness. And, we know what that does. One person going, wait, this doesn't make sense. And I lived that. I mean, the thing that I think taught me the most since 2020 is I just lived, and it was really hard. Like it was for so many people. It was really hard to feel totally hated. in my home because it was not happening yet. We weren't all on the same page. And I was just still like, okay, what can I do today? Like I ended up coaching people who were standing up against the illegal mandates and the experimental injection. I made slides and I did Zooms, and I was just using my coaching skills and applying it to that situation, and then also helping single women too. But I kind of didn't know what to do just yet, and it's still forming. Now it's really much more formed than it was before, but it was rooted in what I knew was true, which was my Irish grandmother came over here at 15. She was scared. You know, her sister who came at a different time was sitting in an office with a cop who had a gun on his waist. And she just thought she was being brought to the office so he was going to kill her. Like she thought that because she was so young. I have a niece her age now. And I think of them all the time. And she was in that office because she actually had relatives coming to pick her up. Like they came here, they found work at 15. My whole life is because of them. I stood up to our council for mandating that shot because I know what this is. You know, I had a father who pointed things out and taught me the history of my people, of where I came from. And he taught me to value what I have. We used to say, we're Irish, right, Dad? And he'd say, you're American. You know, he was really intense about it because he was teaching us. And it takes, like my husband just said to me, oh, they don't want to know. And I said, reluctance to learn in a teenager does not make me flinch. I don't care if they don't want to know. I was reluctant about everything my father was teaching me. And then it all came to life as soon as this all happened. And there it all was. And so that's an individual. If I can connect with my grandma and the sacrifice that she made so that I could live free in this country. And thank you for your service, by the way. And to acknowledge what people have done. And, you know, there's a point I want to make about this, because I think even in the truth and freedom movement, there's so much conspiracy and curiosity. And so people start to even break down the police force and the military in a way that actually starts to echo the left thinking, you know? And so I want to offer this to your listeners. When I hear that stuff, I don't like it. And it's because we have to reduce it to just each individual life, and that they were living for principles. Maybe there are other things that we will come to learn about, you know, the bigger picture. But like, if somebody who was sitting on the couch eating Doritos while you were carrying around all that heavy gear, wearing boots, that if I were to pick them up, it would feel like I was weightlifting, you know, walking heavy gear, carrying heavy gear. That's all I think about. Like, where did your feet go? You know, when we all make friends with our feet and stand in what we've done and what we know has been done for us, then we're on a cognitive battlefield, and we're bulletproof, because we're going, okay, that may be true and that may need to be handled, or there may be more that I don't know. But I do know I was sitting on a couch while someone else was serving so that I could be free. And, you know,
I do know. God, man, you're great at this. Just so you know, like, definitely going to be having you back. And you reminded, well, two things. The first one, because you just reminded me of it, a conversation I had when my girls were very, very young. This is back when they were elementary school. And at elementary school, I want to say it was 4th grade, maybe even 5th. But there was a conversation around the teacher that was kind of just edging in socialism's okay. You know, this, you know, being fair. It's not fair for this person to have a lot and this person doesn't, right? And so, you know, I'm listening, you know, to her, you know, tell me this. And I said, here, let me break this down. You know, military dad. So you guys can imagine the household that these little girls grew up in. Very strict. You know, you don't get to go out to all the gatherings and the birthday parties and this that everybody else does, right? So actually it might have even been 6th grade. It was around that age. And I said, so, you know, well, everybody else got to go to this birthday party. Dad said, you got to stay home and you got to do this report on Texas or this report on whatever it is. And you didn't get to go. And well, no, you know, you can go to the fair, but Dad's picking you up at 2 when everybody else is going to stay till 5 because you got to study for this test. Like, you have when everybody else was getting to have fun, you had to work extra hard to get the good grades. But now you're a straight A student and you got an A in history. But your friend Susie, she didn't turn in her homework, and she did go to all the fun stuff and went to the fair every day. But because she didn't focus any work, when the report cards came out, she got an F. And so the teacher looks at you and says, hey, my daughter's name's Lily, Liliana. And I go, Lily, you got an A, but Susie over here got an F. So what we're going to do is we'll take 2 grades from you and make you a C, and we'll give 2 grades to her that makes her a C, and then you both get a passing grade. She's like, well, no, I worked, I did this. I said, hence why we don't like socialism. They want to take your dad's money that he worked for, that he sacrificed for, and want to give it to people who choose not to work or want to. I go, this is the concept. And I remember at a very young age, the little light bulb went poof, like, oh, hell no, that's BS. Like, I'm never going to sign off on that one. So I want to address that. And now to go earlier into the conversation you're having right now, because I thought it was a very important point, with the equity that we have in these relationships. And when men are being real men, especially in the role of a husband, or maybe, you're not to the point of marriage yet, but it's a long-term partner, boyfriend. And, biblically speaking, the man is the head of the household, right? Another point of that is there's symbolism in religion, if depending on what everybody subscribes to. But, if you believe whether actually happened or just symbolism that, God took the rib, and made woman. Well, one thing, and I learned from boxing, is you hurt the rib. It doesn't matter how strong you are, how many muscles you are, you're done in that fight. You hurt. So with all the big muscles we have as men, you protect that rib, because that rib's protecting these vital things inside of you. So you take care of it. So I don't think it's by accident that God chose to say, hey, the rib is where he picked a part of our body that's very sensitive, very fragile, but also very important. And that when we don't protect that part of that body, we end up getting hurt. And I think there's a point to that. But he didn't choose the foot. He didn't say women were beneath us. He didn't choose the skull to say that in the relationship, women are equal with us. I think there's a lot there if people pay attention to it. And I say all that to say this: when a man is truly in his man's form as the leader of that household, then yes, he has the ultimate decision. But incorporated in that decision is the understanding of what's important to his wife, what's going to make her feel good, what's going to show her that even though we went with your decision, you had the wherewithal to know my value and incorporated things that were going to be important to me, so that when you made that best decision for whatever it is, my influence was still in there, even though I didn't have to ask for it. And I think that it goes back to, the word people get worried about sometimes, yin and yang. When it's in its natural form, it just works.
Yes.
But when you let these outside influences, well, you shouldn't tell him this, girl. And then the guy, well, you better be the man. When you let that external energy, because I do use the word energy because I like it, when you let outside energy come into something that ain't from that power plant, you're going to have problems.
Yep.
And when I hear you speaking, I'm just thinking, like, ladies, y'all better be running and getting on Amy's stuff. And fellas, if you want to get some insider secrets, I suggest you start listening, because I would love for my baby girls to hear the information you're saying, because I can tell that you're coming from a position of not just the educational of studying and listening to these other people, but you can tell that there's also, I've lived it and I've experienced it's incorporated in what you say. And so I want to shift gears here, and I want to go into one subject because I want to make sure we cover it before we leave. And it's another thing you touched on called emotional fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I want to talk about this because, a first responder, emotions, it's important. If as a first responder, if you don't have emotional fitness, you can't do your job, let alone save the people that are entrusting their safety to you. So what kind of brought you to the topic of this in your work?
Well, emotional fitness, I think, is a term I got from Tony Robbins, and I'm not quite sure, but I think I've heard him say it, and I didn't coin that one. But it is what it is. It's being fit on an emotional level. And there's a few things that just came to me, like when you were talking about the lesson that for your daughter, it's so important. And the core of that, to me, the motto I constantly repeat is pressure is a privilege. The chance to be victorious, to get that chance, that is the privilege. That's what being privileged is. And so that's what I teach women on emotional fitness Zooms, which are part of my Substack membership, and they're every other Friday. I teach them to increase their stamina for pressure, for the fact that life isn't fair, and that we get to experience unexpected blessings and things turning out a different way than we thought, and all that stuff, because we're living from a surrendered place. And I teach the mechanisms of activating the inner energies. So when you were talking about that flow, that happens because a masculine leader's job is to share what he thinks, and a feminine follower's job is to share how she feels. And that's in negotiation. Marriage is a collaboration of two souls. So it's going to be complementary, and it's going to flow. If I say to my husband, I feel uncomfortable about blank, what do you think about that? Then he's just going to flow with me. If I start saying, think, I think this, or if he keeps asking me, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And he does do that. In fact, he did that yesterday while we were cleaning up. And I said, if he asks me what I want, it actually makes me agitated. And I look at him and I say, I prefer you tell me what you want, and I'll tell you how I feel about it. And then we just get right back into the flow. That doesn't mean that I don't have thoughts and wants. I do. I had thought about doing this podcast with you. I wanted to do it. I prepared for it, and I was thinking, and that's a different skill set for me. And I call it I put my blue hat on and I go to work, and I take off my blue hat and I put my pink hat on and I go in the house, and I'm dealing with 3 men, and they don't want to know about my job. They want to tell me about their game and everything else, and I'm receptively listening. So it's just flowing back and forth. And yes, you have to just block out a culture that's going to take issue with every single little thing, but it doesn't matter. What matters is the flow that you experience in your life as a result of learning how to do that. That either I've married people on my Zooms, and they're doing the collaboration between two souls. They're learning the negotiable skill set for communication to be married. But there are others who are just preparing for that. They're dating, they're signaling and flirting. So the skill set that I teach, I tell women all the time, I attend my own lectures. I'm on the path with them. I'm a wife. I'm proving the principles to myself every day, and then I'm sharing them with the women I teach. So I'm not one of these people that like lives alone in an apartment with a cat, and I'm like getting people to get down the aisle. I mean, there's a lot of that. And they probably have a skill set that I don't have, like really good marketing. But the truth is, this is like a ministry. It's not technically, but it feels that way. It's like, I just deeply want to help women restore the simplicity of the birds and the bees. And I'm not teaching them anything they don't already know. I'm helping them restore all the knowledge that they already have, but it's been covered up by the culture. And there's one other thing I want to sneak in here about what you said about the rib. That is fascinating. I've never thought about that before. And the rib cage protects the heart. And I want to tell the women out there that when you live according to your standards and you demonstrate that you respect him and you respect his pace, that means if he DMs you back on the app 2 weeks after you thought he would, you can respect his pace. Men feel that breeziness. They feel that okay, I'm going to be, my words will be safe with her. My experiences will be safe with her. That's the dating process. She'll respect my thoughts. And then ultimately what it is that he's finding out if his heart will be safe with her. So that's really interesting about the rib, because, women, feminine followers are yin or feminine on the outside, but on the inside, we're really strong. And I found that out in the last 4 years. Men, so we're actually a compliment here now. We're a demonstration of it. Men are yang on the outside. They are gonna, I know somebody who was at Jason Aldean and he took a bullet for his wife. I personally know that couple. Yep. And he's a first responder too. I got chills just thinking about them. And she is so smart. She is so wise. She has given me so much great advice as a wife. So it's like when we see this like this, we can start to understand it a little bit more. And the truth is, men are very, very tender on the inside.
Never
strong, big out. What?
I'll never admit it.
I was just gonna say. I was gonna start with something like that. But they're big and strong. But they're and you know what they look to with those vulnerabilities on the inside? They look to the inner strength of their yin wife, even if she's 5'1" and 90 pounds soaking wet. It's like they know how strong she is inside. And also when we see the deathbed, when men are running errands a lot of the times when there's a hospice situation, and that's okay. That's their nature. They're like, oh, this is getting a little intense for me. I'm going to go get something done that needs to be done. And who's sitting next to the bed? The ones who have the stamina on the inside. So it's not about better. It's like Dr. Pat Allen used to say, feminism, the dark side of feminism, taught women to become like men as if that was the highest standard. No offense. But it's like as if that was the highest standard. It's not. We each share a set of virtuous standards, and then we flow in collaboration.
I agree with it completely. I had this argument with a guy friend, as a matter of fact. He's one of those guys, and I love him. He has a good heart. He just some things he need to fix, but he's very pro machismo, and he's got a good heart. Everybody, I'm definitely not going to say his name. Everybody's like, tell us who it is. Ain't going to happen. But he's very machismo in some of the arguments we have. So I told him one time, I said, okay, one of these parts has to be, because he's real into muscle cars. I go, one of these parts you can't have on your car. You can only choose one of them. And he goes, all right, where are we going with this? I said, okay, tires or the engine? He's like, well, how are you going to pick something like that? He's like, I go engine, I still can't drive. I got no tires. I go tires, I still can't drive. I got no engine. I go, exactly, brother. I go, but what's stronger? The engine block, steel, metal, all this. Tires, rubber. But without them, car ain't going nowhere, man. I go, you got to look at the relationship like that. There's a time for strength. There's a time for softness. There's a time for power. There's a time for guidance. There's just, you got to look at it, at least to me. And I'm not saying that I got all the answers, but I was debating whether I was going to say this, because I was like, my DMs and emails are probably going to blow up with this stuff from the fellas. And if it does, it does. I'll try to help if I haven't put enough work on my plate. But there's some guys that have reached out and they're like, hey, Alpha, because we have our locker room talk. You got to see some of that on Liberty Den. And, I make it no secret. God bless me with, my dating life. It, led me, a very lucky man, definitely was always outside of my scale, so to speak. So I'll get guys that'll come and be like, man, how do I get this woman's attention? How do I improve my love life? Whatever the case may be. So I have some initial questions, because motive's important to me. I'm a dad of girls, so motive's important to me. So I'll tell them, well, tell me about yourself, so they, they'll go off and, sometimes there's a little hesitation and I'll help them through it. And then I'd be like, okay, now tell me about her. And this is where things are important to me. And fellas, if you're going to look out for me advice and you think I'm giving out the secret, I was a detective. I can see through things. You won't be able to trick me. And usually I'm going to get one of these things. And a lot of times I'm looking for the combination of, but I'll get, well, she's great. She's got good boobs or a good butt or it's this. And it's just this long list of physical things. So I said, well, then you're not into her. You're lusting for her. Like there's a primitive attraction that's going on right here. So tell me, like, what is she like? And if they can't, because sometimes guys want to talk about the physical attributes with another guy. And I understand that, because sometimes I'll ask and then they'll list all the other things. And I'm like, okay, so you do know about this person. And if it's somebody that's just for the physical, I just don't feel comfortable. I'm just gonna be like, I don't know, man. You just gotta figure that one out. Yeah, I'm not trying to help you put a notch on the belt. Like I ain't gonna do that. But if there's a guy that's just, I'm dealing with the self-confidence issue here. And a few of the guys that I've helped with this, I'll say very successfully, is in the end, I didn't really. Here's the other thing, because people say, oh, there's books and this and this. We're all too unique to books are great for guidance, but we're all still God made us perfectly different. And it's that difference that is what another person's probably going to find an attraction to. And so I won't say, hey, well, this worked for him and that worked for him. Let's look at your situation. And then I'll talk to them. And most of the time, it's not really getting them to do something for her. It's helping them recognizing the confidence in them. Because most of the time that I've noticed with fellas, it's an inner issue that's really preventing them from being able to go and seek out that relationship or make that move. And some of the stuff is real simple, some of the stuff is complex and takes longer, but I've been able to help guys go and get these relationships, and some of them have turned into great long lasting relationships, and it's cool to hear that. And some it worked for a while, and then it just person wasn't who they thought they were, and it was what it is. But it's just interesting to hear, like you said, we got a good yin and yang going here, to hear you speaking from this perspective of the woman and what it needs. And it just really put into my mind like how this works. Like there's no way I could ever speak for women. Like I'm not a woman. I just can't. I can offer my best advice, but I'm not that piece of the puzzle. And so, as we wrap it up here, and I'll give you the final thoughts, you can let everybody know where to find you. What you kind of showed me today, I mean, a lot is, and I'll go with I'll do my best for a music analogy, because I'm not I love music, but I don't know anything about the little squiggly things that go on paper. Okay. I don't know that stuff. But what I do know is if you got an instrumental song, because I really do like instrument. When I've said this before, sometimes I work out to let the bodies hit the floor kind of music. And sometimes I'm working out to piano music. That's just the way I am. But with instrumental music, and you have, 5 or 6 different instruments, if each one of those instruments at the perfect time, it has what makes that instrumental song so good. It's at that perfect timing. It's the perfect note. It's the perfect power of that instrument. But if you just move those things off just a little bit, each one, it sounds like noise. It's terrible. You're like, what the heck? But if those instruments do it at the perfect time and at the perfect power, it sounds beautiful. And listening to you kind of explain all these things is just when I see men and women, it's like if we just be the best version of ourselves at the best time, then it's just everything's gonna be beautiful.
Yes.
And I want to say I've enjoyed this conversation. You've taught me a lot. Like there's just some stuff I'm like, man, I feel like I just got some free stuff today, everybody. So I'm good with that. But Amy, your final thoughts, and then let us know where can everybody find you? Is there anything that you're working on? How do people find the book? When's the book come out? Let's market Amy right now.
Thank you. Okay. So, well, I can't resist responding just to one thing, which is that what you were talking about with men, lust doesn't last. And so if it is lust, it just won't last. But it's like there's constantly nuance. Those little things that he loves about her and that caught his eye immediately, that's not wrong. It's natural. And sometimes that becomes an imprint for what is a long, long life together. So men shouldn't have to repress liking her boobs. Or I remember my husband feeling my ankles when we were sipping tea. I had him over for tea. He's like feeling my ankles. I'm like, okay. He's like, I really like your ankles. Okay. Then later on, I learned that he just loves skinny ankles. It's like, these are little imprints that then grow. It contains lust. A little dose of lust, a healthy dose of lust is a good thing. and then let it grow. So I call it like, let's get deeper than an ashtray. You know, that's like my joke. Deeper than an ashtray, please. If you're going deep with yourself in certain areas, or to the extent that you can, then you'll use those little hooks of attraction with her. But yes, your job is still an inside job. And there's so much I could say, but we'll just have to we'll have to do another show at some point, maybe. But I'm working on a book that's out this summer. I am looking for someone to publish it at the moment. So I've been starting to stretch a little in case there's a publisher that's good for me, and I've submitted recently. But I'm going to put it out anyway, even if someone else doesn't want to publish it. I'm going to do that by summer. And it's a memoir and a handbook. So it's my story and then a handbook of all the principles I teach women. And I have a Substack, and I do have a subscription where you can subscribe and then join the Zooms and learn more. And I have essays on culture capture on that Substack. I have a website, amyloftus.com. And then I have a bunch of albums on Spotify and everywhere you can listen to digital music. And I guess that's about the whole thing. And this has just been I really want to emphasize, I have free tools, and the kind of work that I teach, it's okay to just lean on my free tools as long as you want, because sometimes you have to slowly take this stuff in because there's so much to detox. There's so much to forget that the culture has really messed up with us, you know? And so I really encourage women to look at the free tools. I have one on mothering, because many people don't understand this, but mothering is masculine energy. It's a short-term burst of masculine energy in a feminine woman's life. And that's why it can sometimes cause married couples to compete, because a woman is in her masculine energy leading children all day. So I have a pamphlet on that, because that's a really important thing, I think, for married women to restore and retain the chemistry. And then there are other ones, my dating bill of rights, and giving women permission to just set standards that make them feel safe. It's wonderful to date if you don't burden yourself with premature casual sex, alcohol, all that stuff. I encourage women to just go have tea with someone for an hour, have a conversation. Emotional intimacy is something that's practiced with the self, and then you practice it in courtship. And then when you maintain it in your marriage, it keeps the spark alive. Communication and trust is hot. It's way hotter than what a lot of women are doing on a poll on Instagram and normalizing, super lots of skin, showing lots of skin. I discourage women from doing that, even if they're professional models. Or I've had some professional models come to me and they're like, oh, it gets me work. And I'm like, well, just don't, just have a private Instagram that someone can, we can help men. We can help them work on pursuing us by giving them a lot of wholesome reasons to. I don't want to start going on a whole I'm susceptible to a whole nother tangent here, and I know you're wrapping it up, but it's like, it really is helping each other. As I teach married couples to ask, how can I help you feel better? He asks, how can I help you feel better? She asks, how can I help us do better? Because he's in charge of the whole, And so it's like we can help each other all along the way. And so I just encourage women to get quiet, restore that listening, that breathing, that feeling. What is my real dream? What is it that I could change about myself today? I encourage women to imagine a guy walking into her apartment or home as it is right now. Are you okay with that? Like him just dropping in. And then picture that if you're listening to this and you're single, there's your work. That's how easy this is. So I encourage women to do that with my free tools, to just work with them. There's a bunch of pamphlets. You can print them out, put them in your Bible or put them in your spiritual text, and just have reflection in the morning on the slow, steady race. Slow and steady wins the race, right?
It does. And I really like that picture your apartment right now. She was walking. And fellas, picture your truck right now. If she jumped in your truck. How are you feeling about that, man? Amy, you're fantastic. If you're listening while driving, you guys, don't worry. The links, everything Amy just talked about down in the description below. You can grab that stuff. You guys, I've been absolutely just awesome to learn from you today, Amy. We're going to have you back. Mark my words, everybody. There's a lot of future conversations that we need to build off from here. You guys, we didn't interrupt this show. We ran commercial free to the end. So do me a favor, stick around, support the people that support this show because they know the kind of content I put. And we're starting to pick up a lot of mainstream affiliates and partners. So, and with that, Amy, let's do a little surprise for the guests. If you're okay, I'll put you on the spot here. When we come back from the commercials, what is a song that I can play from your music that on the way out, everybody can hear?
Oh, I'll tell you the quick story of it. Remember how I told you I was praying to be relieved of my TDS, my Trump derangement syndrome, as a deluded Dem? I wrote a song called We Have It All. And when I listened to, and that was 2018. When I listen to it now, in the context of, you know, there's a lot about the truth movement that's like, we already have it all. We know it already. And the stuff that all of these digital soldiers, God bless all of them, have pushed into the forefront with their memes, masculine energy showing. That's what memes are. It's like a masculine protection of the country. And so when I listen to We Have It All, I'm like, whoa, that was God. I didn't know what I was writing that song about, but I always wrote everything I did was for God. And I knew that God was giving me lyrics. And so now that just has I have a whole different experience listening to that song now.
Well, there you have it, folks. Stick around for the commercials. And after that, you'll hear the song. We Have It All. Till next time, you guys, I'll see you guys Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Alpha, first in, last out. Semper Fi.
Are you worried about the effects that higher inflation rates will have on your investments? Are you trying to secure your retirement savings against losses, but you notice that inflation is a hot topic these days? But how dangerous are low inflation rates on your retirement savings? An inflation rate of 2% may not seem like much, but it means that prices will just about quintuple over the lifetime of the average American. And 4% average inflation rate means that something that costs $1 when they're born will cost $23 when they die. That demonstrates the danger of even low inflation rates. So when it comes to gold and inflation rates, many investors want to know whether inflation rates have an effect on gold prices. What history indicates is that over the long term, increased inflation should lead to correspondingly higher gold prices. From September 1971 to August 2020, gold grew 7.5 times as much as inflation. Not only can an investment in physical gold help protect your assets against the damage done by inflation, it can also help grow the value of your retirement portfolio over the long term. If you're looking to protect your retirement assets, why wait until stock markets crash and gold begins to rise in price?
like heaven sent down angels, sent down angels. Shook me, took me by surprise, opened up my eyes, turn those tables, turn those tables. We can't deny we have it all, where we just don't care. It all we're there already, where we just don't care. It all we're there already. We have it all, everything. Stop looking, listen, baby, this is a dream. Having it all, we have it all, everything. Stop looking, listen, baby, this is a dream. Hitched the whole way to the end, just to find the horizon was changing, always changing. Clearing out the open skies, felt the falling back to rise. Those angels, ooh, those angels. We have it all, where we just don't care. It all we're there already, where we just don't care. It all we're there already. This grass is real green, more than a magazine at all. My 3D's got sheen, it's all happening, it's all real at all. This grass is real green, more than a magazine. My 3D's got sheen, it's all happening, it's all real. We can't deny we have it all, where we just don't care. It all we're there already, where we just don't care. It all we're there already, where we just don't care. It all we're there already, where we just don't care. It all we're there already.